chairman and CEO of GIG Group. You know GIG as God is Good Motors. So he changed the company from what is called God is Good to now GIGM, and they have GIG Logistics, one of the biggest logistic firm in Nigeria. Please welcome with me on stage Chidi Ajaere. So we will be spending time talking about transportation and more like running a company entrepreneurship in Nigeria. So let me start with this. I have to jump into this question. Transportation system in Nigeria, you know it as an Agbero thing. I mean, anybody will just put a bus, especially when it comes to land transportation and intercities transportation. You see people calling Aba this thing. But looking at GIJ, before we even met, whenever I'm traveling, I use GIJ. For one thing, it's not about anything because of security, and you just know you are going to deliver. How did you turn the company from God is good, and how did you turn the entire company around to build it to what it is today?
Okay, fantastic question. Nice to see large number of people today in the audience. It's actually very exciting to know that there are lots of Nigerians that are very tech savvy, interested in technology. But while it's a good job, by the way, before I answer your question, I think that it's important to just give a brief history of what has led us to where we are now. So you mentioned that transportation industry in Nigeria is largely unregulated. So that's the, where the idea of running transportation, the anyhowness, or running transportation almost like in a toutish way. So in 2009, that was where my main entrepreneurial journey started. So I was doing my first degree in Canada at the time. I got a call one morning that my dad had just been kidnapped from church, and I needed to come home and try to salvage the situation as the eldest son in the house. So, anyways, I came back. Cut the long story short, once I came, what I didn't know at the time was I already lost my dad. So I came back to Nigeria and found out that I had lost my dad. Keep in mind, in 2009, that was March of 2009. That same year, I was going to be 21 in June. So I was relatively young. Then I, found myself saddled with this responsibility to manage this transport business in an industry that was largely unregulated. You had a lot of people doing transportation just very differently. And I thought to myself, if I was going to manage the business, um, you know, I needed to do things differently. So in answering your question, there are a few things that led up to like where we are now, and I think it usually starts with a desire to want to make things better, to make a situation better, right? So um, for for the road transport industry, for example, you find that at the time, customer service was basically zero. You had a lot of people in the industry at the time who were doing a fantastic job. So one of my desire was how do we make it better? How do we take it from where it was right now to becoming a world-class transport system? So I've experienced better service. Um, so anyways, first thing I did so is desire. Desire led to the vision. So usually people usually ask. There's usually this talk of vision. Does vision come first before desire? In my opinion, there has to be a burning desire. So for those people who want to do businesses, there has to be a burning desire to want to make things better, and then that leads into the vision, and then from the vision, you begin to craft out your roadmap, to what you want. So my idea is like after the desire, I felt like, look, can we make road transportation better? Can people come into better environments? Can the staff dress better? So the perception of road transportation, it was a mind work at the time. So after desire, vision then led to mind work, right? So when I came in, you had the drivers who would usually come to work, they would show up to work with bathroom slippers, shorts, and just dress anyhow. You find the staff, they were not really, composed. So those low-hanging fruit, we started changing the way the drivers would dress. We started changing the psyche of our employees to help them understand that transportation to show them a different roadmap can be better. We started changing the brand of the transport company itself. So it was from God is Good Motors, even the way we wrote our name, we changed that. And then from God is Good Motors, we metamorphosed into GIGM with a mindset that we were building a world class transport institution. We could export our technology from a largely Christian environment, largely Christian Southern environment, to the north and to any other part of the world or any other part of the African country that is not necessarily Christian. So yes, I would say it was desire to change and make things better. That led to the vision that we had for an improved customer service, investing in nicer terminals, investing in training our staffs, and then that led into changing the psyche of our staff. And then most importantly, and I think that this is also very important for those people who are running businesses here, it was a focus on the customer experience. So for us, we weren't building a business for ourselves, we were building a business for the customer. So we kept, like, our focus every day is like, what do the customers want? How do we make the experience better for them? So when I came in, most of the terminals at the time, remember at the time, we had just about 4 or 5 terminals when I started managing about 90 buses and about 120 staff at that time. And the transport parks, they usually call them parks at the time. They were done like under bridges, just in open environments. So we started investing our money building better terminals so that guests can come in. In fact, we changed the name from customers to guests because I kept reminding my staff that people who walked into our premises, they were no longer our customer. We need to treat them like guests who were coming into our homes. And then the staff like the drivers, from drivers, we started changing the way they call themselves from drivers to captain. Those little low-hanging fruit, those little things changed the entirety of how people started thinking about transport companies. So drivers would then tell me that when they were going on the road, that the police guys on the road now respected them more because they were wearing better uniforms. They'll call themselves captains, right? The staff, the managers who would come to work wearing slippers and shorts started putting on suits. So they would go out there and people were respecting them more. Even the customers were respecting them more. Customers will come into, yeah. So, yeah. So you have customers who will come into better environments, nice TVs, nice sitting environment, and then from moving about 50 bus daily, we moved on to 100 to 120 to 200 to 300 to 400. I yeah. So so I inherited about 90 or 90 something buses at the time. Right now in Nigeria, we're doing over 700 buses actively on the road. Yeah. So yeah.
So
So yeah.
that's interesting.
Yes.
You took over the company at the age of 21.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
and you have 70 buses.
Yeah.
I I could imagine the drivers there.
Yes.
How did you, how was it like at this young age taking over such company? And not just company, if it's a company that you have the young people like you running, but you have people that are kind of elderly, how do you work with it? How do you transform this entire thing yourself, and what are the challenges for other young people there trying to take on through this challenge?
Okay. So I think largely in Nigeria, I find that a lot of the older folks don't believe a lot in the younger generation. I don't know why that is. Um, you know, so usually at that time, it was like shock and disbelief. So people didn't really believe a young man in his 20s would be able to transform a business where, remember, you had a lot of established interests. They were behemoths that were already in the industry at the time. Many people who we used to look up to at that time in the industry, today they now look up to us and what we're doing. So we have, yeah, yeah, yeah. So at the time, I had like a lot of older folks who were working with my dad, who started working with me. A lot of people, more people actually expected us to fail, expected me to fail than to succeed because I was very young. Remember that I spent like 3 years out of the country at the time before I came in, right? But for me, I always had the confidence, and I think that that's something that was very important, and many people have asked me this question that you've just asked, like as a young man, how do you thrive to run businesses? So I just do my business as as Chidi. I don't think about myself as a young man. So once people begin to interact with me and they understand the content of my character, right? They are usually like in shock and in disbelief. So, but at that time, though, once I started pointing out the direction I wanted us to go to as a company, and usually, so I have an example. One of the first major changes I made at the time, I called a couple of like the senior staff. We wanted to change the brand of the company at the time, and then everybody came around. I asked the design guy to design the new logo on the bus, and then I was trying to get their opinion. This was one of the earliest decisions that I had made, and every person except me. Remember that these guys have been in the industry 20, 15 years. Everybody except me, they all felt like, no, we should do it the same way we used to do it. And I allowed everybody to speak for like maybe 20 minutes. They were all giving their different opinion. And at some point, I'm like, okay, it's okay. I've heard what you've said. But if we keep doing things the same way, we're not going to experience like a different result. And I stuck to the brand that we had. So a week later, they all started coming back to me and saying that people actually appreciated the new logo and the new design that we had. And then after that, whenever I'll tell them stuff, they will usually
So,
want to do. Yeah.
thank you for that. One
Yes.
thing you did
Yeah.
is I remember DIGL, which
Yes.
is your logistics arm.
Yeah.
Used to be people go to park,
Yeah.
they give the driver something
Yeah.
and to take it to deliver to Aba or
Yeah.
Port Harcourt, and you turned that to a business.
Yeah.
How did that transformation happen? And those drivers that actually go with delivering this,
Yeah.
how do they feel them before they embrace it?
Wow. Like I said, is the first thing is trying to change. It's a mind work, trying to change the mindset of people and helping them understand the benefits. So, again, it was just a transport company that I had inherited at the time. And then now we're going on to build one of the fastest growing logistics business in Nigeria. The logistics is different from the passenger transportation. So we identified that there was opportunity. Remember that, like I've always said, that transport is at the heart of every revolution, right? I think that a major catalyst to human civilization had to do with transportation, movement of people from one place to the other, and then also movement of goods from one place to the other actually propelled globalization. And I felt that because we understood the logistics industry, it was important that we played in that space. Aside moving people from one place to the other, we needed to move goods. So usually when I'll show up to our terminal, I'll see guys who will come in. They wanted to ship an item from Lagos to Benin, from Benin to Abuja. And I felt there was an opportunity there. I remember the professor earlier was talking about identifying opportunity. And I thought that, look, we could build a brand around it. And that's exactly what we did. So we started showing people a different way of trying to, do the logistics business. And once they saw that there was benefit in it for them, like everybody conformed. Initially, it was hard, but over time, it became easier.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you so much. So, looking at it now, by the new research,
Yeah.
by 2040,
Yeah.
more than 70% of the cars in the world are going to be electric cars.
Yes.
What are you guys looking in that way? What are we going to get? Are you guys actually planning to do something to disrupt that space, or you're waiting for another startup to come and wipe everyone off?
I'm not sure if we're going to be sitting down to wait for that. But so the way we're looking at it is we're looking at supporting, partnering, and investing in that space. So most of us have heard that in places like France, in Europe, for example, in the next 15, 20 years, most of their 70 to 80% of their vehicle will run on batteries, on electricity. Also in China, China is also making like rapid advancement. So the way I see it is, it's not just a private sector. It wouldn't just be, especially in Nigeria, a private sector-driven initiative. The government has very significant role to play in that, in that sector, for any company, even in Nigeria, to thrive in that space. But we already have a couple of companies that are talking to us already, who want us to begin to test their electric vans within our fleet. We're also looking at investing in that area. We're open to the idea of investing in startup who would pioneer electric vehicle. But Wale, the truth is that if we must succeed in Nigeria, we're going to need a lot of government involvement, creating policies that would actually enable such industries to thrive. I mean, you can't begin to talk about electric vehicles in Nigeria if you do not have 24-hour power supply, right? So those are, yeah, yeah. So those are some of the issues we need to begin to address in Nigeria for, and not just in electricity, in everything largely. I think we'll get there.
You actually took the other word out of my mouth, which
Yeah.
I was trying to say. You should point some policies the government should be doing. What should they be doing beyond just electricity to support the industry you are playing in?
Okay, so I know that there's been attempts, but the government needs to be very open and sincere about it. And yes, it's okay to talk about the government and blame the government. So I look at everybody in the room. We have probably over 3,000 people in this room that are, very interested in technology. It'll be interesting for you to know that California, which is just a state in America, is the fifth largest economy in the world, and technology is contributing a huge part of the Californian GDP. California workforce, private workforce, about 13.7 million people. And in Nigeria, we say we have over 150 or 80 million people, right? Most of these people are young people, right, who can really transform the entire Nigerian landscape using technology, right? But we need the government. So it's not just about saying it to the government. We need every single individual here to begin to ask the government who will be our next Minister of Technology in 2019. How many of us will be voting for the right person to ensure that we're creating the right policies? So when you look at Tesla, for Tesla to have succeeded to the point where they are now, they had a lot of government support from the American government, right? So you look at in China, for example, look at Didi. We saw like the battle between Uber and Didi, WeChat and what do you call WhatsApp, right? You find that in China there are targeted government policies that encourages local entrepreneurs and local entities to succeed and even beat their rival. Alibaba today is one of the largest, technology company and one of the largest traded in America. But at some point, what many people don't know is that Yahoo came into China with eBay. eBay came into China to threaten Alibaba's dominance, right? But Alibaba was still able to succeed because the Chinese government had targeted policy that encouraged and supported the tech industry and just general commerce in China. And we know what the story is today.
GIG,
Yes.
as a group, you guys, you have a lot of technology backing
Yes.
your operation. I
Yeah.
remember when we went on Techpoint tours,
Yeah.
and they found your driver in Jos.
Yeah.
There was call coming on because there was signal. You guys track a lot of this thing. Are
Yeah.
you trying with all this strength you guys have, all this power, all
Yeah.
this infrastructure? Are you looking at intrastate? Are you looking at intrastate at all instead of interstates?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. So we are, and so what we are doing right now at the GIG group. First, remember that we're largely technology driven, right? 55% of our business is in the transport and logistics. We also have other entities in energy and finance and media. But on the logistics side, both the commerce and the transport side, um, yes, we are. So you just mentioned when you came into the GIGM, you saw like we have, for example, in-house, we have a lot of our tech guys who build our applications for us. We're focusing a lot on how do we use technology to make transportation very convenient. So for us, it's like when you asked that question initially, when you talked about the regulation, because we noticed that the system wasn't regulated, we started asking ourselves, how do we regulate the industry internally, right, to ensure that we're able to improve customer satisfaction, we're able to improve the safety standards, right? So we're able to just improve the overall convenience of doing road transportation in Nigeria. So we are looking at all aspects of transportation, whether intracity, whether interstate. But we feel like it's important that we conquer one area, we focus on one area, conquer that area, and then begin to expand into other areas.
So thank you very much. I have one last question.
Yeah.
There are young people there.
Yeah.
Everybody's looking for the solution to Nigeria.
Yeah.
There are people striving, people trying to change the narrative, not
Yeah.
waiting for the government. So what is the advice you have for young people, especially people looking to play in your space as well?
Okay. I'll say it all starts with a desire. So we all must have a desire to want to make a situation better. So I read your introduction earlier when you were addressing, you have come to play in a space to try to make technology visible through your media platform. So I'm sure you found an emptiness and you had that burning desire. And from that desire, you started envisioning what would a tech point, what can tech points offer to Nigeria? So you envision tech point inspired, right? And then the elements, so is the desired vision, but there are certain elements that will then help you achieve that vision. And I think it first starts with character, the character of the person, right? So, character, we'll talk about discipline, things like discipline, delayed gratification. So you find a lot of young people, for example, today who are not very patient. They just want to enjoy now and forget about tomorrow, right? I think that one has to have the perseverance, the capacity to be able to enjoy or endure delayed gratification. So instead of the Brazilian hair that you're buying for, yes, yeah. So so instead of the Brazilian hair or trying to compete with guys who are on Instagram with the Rolex watches they are wearing or their shoes, are we taking that money and investing, maybe going down at Bay and buy a property for 500,000, a million naira to save? For example, I usually tell them in the office, I see, like, I love cars, for example, but I'm trying to build a business. I've been using my car now for the last maybe 5, 6 years. I can afford to, go to the company account and get 60, 70 million and buy a new car, right? But I'd rather use that money and invest into building a new terminal, into trying to grow my brand than personal enjoyment. Yeah. So, so yeah, I think a lot of young people are more interested in the things they see on social media these days. Go to the club, popping champagne, trying to wear Rolex wristwatches and all of that. It's not about that. So delayed gratification, I experienced that from my dad. When I was growing up, we grew up in a three-bedroom apartment when my dad started building his transport business. My dad had very limited education, but I learned a lot of my he was my greatest mentor. So I'll see him. He bought his first interstate transport vehicle, and then he wanted to buy the next. So usually he will call my mom, call my brothers, and say to us that, look, we'll have to discipline ourselves. We might not be able to eat chicken like our neighbors, right? Maybe we're going to eat, they call them the dry fish, bunga fish at the time, right? And we'll make that every Sunday, even when the neighbors are eating chicken. But he knew exactly where he was trying to go to. And then we will save from the one bus, we bought the next. From the second, we bought the third. From the third, we bought the fourth. And then he started growing. As a young man, I'll see my dad when he was building his transport business. We had other transporters who were not so far from us, right? My dad was using an old, almost rickety Nissan vehicle at the time. The other guys, they will go buy a newer Land Cruiser and many times drive in front of my dad's office, maybe just to show off. But my dad didn't care about that. He cared about how he would build his business. And he was always reminded that the end would justify the beginning, right? So, so yes. So today, those guys who would usually go buy vehicles from, the other transporters who usually go buy vehicles from, many of them today are now looking up to us and seeing the things that we're doing. So my advice is you have to have a good moral character. You have to have self-discipline to understand that the things you see on social media, what people, you're not comparing yourself to others, you're only in competition with yourself, right? And if you're building a product, whether in tech, anywhere, you need to focus on the customer experience. You're not building the technology or you're not building the business for yourself. You're building it first for your customers. And then I think I must mention this also. I know Prof mentioned earlier, he talked about knowledge and said knowledge was old. Yes, that's true. I understand where that's coming from. But I think, in my opinion, that knowledge is the principal thing. The Holy Book says um, wisdom, knowledge is the principal thing. And I've come in my journey since 2009 till date. I believe that the salvation of Africa, the salvation of every business, rests on three things. Number one is knowledge, the second is leadership, and the third is technology. First, you have to know, right? So even if you have vision, you have to be able to have the education to be able to make your vision come to pass. So the guys who are here, for example, who have listened to everybody who has spoken, they've gotten some type of knowledge that they otherwise didn't have before they came in here, right? And then the next leadership, how are you maybe leading your business, leading your ideas, leading your entity? And then for every young individual here, you must recognize that we all have the energy. So the guys like Mark Zuckerberg, for example, in 10 years, in a decade, built wealth that people like Warren Buffett in 30 years couldn't build. So there are people here who would build singular technologies that they can export out of Nigeria, and in less than 10 years, they will make more money than a Dangote. Technology can help us scale, right? Yeah, absolutely. So we have all it takes, everyone in this room, all the young people here, we have all it takes in 10 years to be able to build that type of wealth and capacity that the guys before us couldn't build.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Chidi Ajaere. I think I should take one question, just one. Just one question. Just one question.
Sir, and that is, how did you deal with competition when you started? And when you started, you didn't have that much knowledge. How did you acquire knowledge for your industry?
Okay, okay. All right, so very fantastic question. So I'll usually say to my people that, so I think you need to be able to embrace competition. So I remember early on, when we open up in new terminals, in certain areas, you find like a lot of people who will start coming around us, and my guys will come to me and say, why are these guys coming? What would we do? And all of that. And I'll usually say to them, if we come into a new area and it's just us, we can only attract our customers. But when we come into a new area and you have other people come around us, we can also attract their customers if we do very well, right? So I think that it's important that you don't see competition as the enemy. By the way, in transport those days, when you open up a new terminal beside other transporters, they will come and fight you. They will use stout and all of that. We wouldn't do that, right? Because we feel like the market is actually very big enough. We have 180 million people. You just do your best to be able to take on or take from the other people's customers as well. So, yeah, I don't know.
Knowledge acquisition. How do you acquire knowledge?
What did you say? Okay, you said what?
Knowledge.
Okay, for the industry. Okay, so honestly, I always feel like, so when Wale had approached me a couple of times to say I should try to maybe be here, Tech Inspired, even in the last one, I get guys who usually want me to come talk. I'm usually a shy person. I want to do stuff from the background, right? But aside that, one of the reasons why I would usually shy away from talking to people is because I feel like, it's like how you say you can force the horse to the river, but you cannot force the horse to drink water, right? The desire to change, the desire to want to do something different has to first come from inside you. I learned a lot from my dad, but even as a young man, I did my first university in Nigeria here. I started renting out my laptops to people. I was already entrepreneurial in nature, but I learned a lot from my dad. But you find a lot of people will come here, they will listen, they will read all the motivational books, but they will never change until a man is ready to change. So I don't think it's about just the things I read, the knowledge. People have asked me, if you didn't travel, if you didn't do your degree outside of Nigeria, would you still do the same thing? Absolutely, I would do the same thing because it first starts with the desire to want to make things better, and then that leads to the vision, and then every other thing follows.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Oh, yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. A big round of applause for him.